Thank you. Again, thank you.
A rekindled friendship chased away any winter chill at the White House Wednesday. After years of tension with the Obama administration, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu sees President Trump as a key partner.
I've known the president and I've known his family and his team for a long time. And there is no greater supporter of the Jewish people and the Jewish state than President Donald Trump.
But there are key issues to work through, starting with how to achieve peace between Israel and the Palestinians.
As with any successful negotiation, both sides will have to make compromises. You know that, right?
In comments that would no doubt anger Palestinian leaders, Trump said a two-state solution isn't a requirement for peace.
So I'm looking at two-state and one-state, and I like the one that both parties like. I'm very happy with the one that both parties like. I can live with either one.
Netanyahu maintains Palestinians must recognize Israel's right to exist before any peace plan can move forward.
You have to ask yourself, why are Jews called Jews? Well, the Chinese are called Chinese because they come from China. The Japanese are called Japanese because they come from Japan. Well, Jews are called Jews because they come from Judea. This is our ancestral homeland. Jews are not foreign colonialists in Judea.
The other thorny issue is on so-called settlements. In the West Bank, Netanyahu has pushed forward, but the White House says that may not be the best move for a peace deal. It's a topic CBN News asked about at their joint news conference.
On the settlement issue, are you both on the same page? How do you exactly term that as it relates to the settlement issue?
As far as settlements, I'd like to see you hold back on settlements for a little bit. We'll work something out, but I would like to see a deal be made. I think a deal will be made.
Let's try it.
Doesn't sound too optimistic, but that's he's a good negotiator.
That's the art of the deal.
It also provided the president his first opportunity to address the controversy concerning fired National Security Advisor Mike Flynn. He didn't address the timetable of what he knew about his campaign advisors talking with Russian officials. Instead, he blamed the media.
I think he's been treated very, very unfairly by the media, as I call it, the fake media in many cases. And I think it's really a sad thing that he was treated so badly. I think in addition to that, from intelligence, papers are being leaked, things are being leaked. It's criminal action, criminal act, and it's been going on for a long time before me, but now it's really going on.
The key question remains whether the Trump administration can begin to plug these leaks so he can move forward with his agenda.
Well, thanks, David. You know, it is astounding that the media has got their noses bent out of shape. These are the media that said Trump was a fake, a phony. He needed to get impeached. You go down the line of all the stuff he lied, he did this. And then they wonder why they're not given preferred treatment in the White House briefing room. MSNBC, ultra-liberal, CNN, extremely liberal, and they're not getting called on, and they get mad. Why? Because a guy named David Brody, representing the Christian Broadcasting Network, gets the first question from Washington. David, that's quite a kudo, brother.
Well, I got to tell you, Pat, when I was at the White House yesterday, I probably should have brought the smelling salts. I could have handed them out to the mainstream media members that were probably passed out, a full frontal, right in front of me. Yeah, it's a new day in D.C. for sure, and it was great to be called on. And it's really been a long time coming, and we definitely should be called on. And why? Well, because hello, we've got important questions to ask, and indeed that was what we did yesterday, trying to weave in Israel, the Iran deal into that first question, plus settlements, plus Russia and Michael Flynn. Hey, Pat, I went for the whole enchilada, and I tried to do what I could do.
Well, you did a great job. Hey, listen, this Iran thing, is there some hidden thing that the Obama administration doesn't want anybody to know about? Was there something concealed that now is going to come to light? Have you heard about?
Well, keep your eye on a guy named Ben Rhodes, former Obama advisor, high-ranking Obama advisor. More may indeed come out here in the near future about him. He's a guy, they kind of labeled him, or at least conservatives labeled him, the pro-Iran wing of the White House, a guy that was not happy at all with the fact that Michael Flynn, who, of course, is a big, staunch supporter of Israel, was the national security advisor. So there's some speculation that he may be behind some of these leaks. The problem with these leaks, Pat, is that they're springing up everywhere. I mean, it could be Ben Rhodes, but quite frankly, it's not just Ben Rhodes. Sources telling me that some are coming, yes, within the White House, folks that didn't necessarily were simpatico with Michael Flynn. So you've got that. You've got the bureaucracy leaks coming from all over Washington, and then within the Obama administration, or the former Obama administration as well.
David, you know, I was talking to Drew Parkhill yesterday about how you fire people. It's not easy to get rid of people. I suppose that they can assign them to a post in Alaska or on the border of Mexico and get them out of Washington. They can do that under the Civil Service Act, can't they?
All right. Yeah, well, apparently that would be an option, but, you know, once again, this is going to be a problem, Pat, going forward, because Trump came here to drain the swamp, and the swamp is large, and that means that you just don't get a free pass, or excuse me, you don't just get this idea that you can just go ahead and be a federal worker forever. There are some real inherent issues with that.
You know, Obama criticized Mitt Romney, who said he thought Russia was a big problem, and they laughed at him and said he didn't know what he's talking about. But the truth is now they have made Russia front and center, and there's this narrative going around that there's this collusion, and that there needs to have all sorts of hearings to discover what that plot is. What do you hear about all that?
Well, you're absolutely right, Pat. It is somewhat of a double standard here because, indeed, the president and many of his advisors had said, kind of even laughed off at the time, this whole idea about Russia being this geopolitical force, as Mitt Romney talked about. And now they're the ones peddling that Russia's responsible for everything. So it is kind of interesting. I will say this. Look for Congressman Jason Chaffetz to be in the news quite a bit. He's the head of the House Ethics Reform Committee on Capitol Hill. He's going to be, in essence, the top cop here as a Republican. Watch for him. If he decides to go forward with some of these investigations into Russia and the Trump administration, he'll be on the hot seat by a lot of conservatives for even bringing it up. But there is a sense that he will do potentially something here. And here's the thing. And you know, Pat, you got Lindsey Graham and John McCain and Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins and a bunch of the moderates playing live on Broadway on Capitol Hill, and they want to have their voices heard. So this Trump administration could be in for some rocky times ahead, especially on Capitol Hill with Republicans.
You know, McCain kind of makes me sick. I mean, it looks like he is determined to be the voice of the opposition in the Republican Party to everything Trump wants to do. I mean, what is it with him?
Well, I got to tell you, one of the things with John McCain, and one of the reasons that he did not, become president of the United States, is he had a problem with the real true conservative portion of the base, because he has played the establishment card. He has played the bipartisan card up on Capitol Hill. It's worked for longevity in his district, but it didn't work for becoming president of the United States. And beyond that, I think what you're seeing with John McCain is someone who really kind of embodies the whole Washington bureaucratic establishment in D.C. Very well respected up on the Hill, but when it comes to this idea of establishment politicians, John McCain would pretty much be kind of the poster boy for establishment politicians in this country. I don't think there's any question about it, and he wears that with a badge of honor, by the way. I mean, if I said that to him, he'd say, well, that's right, because that's all about bipartisanship and being a statesman. We hear that a lot up here on Capitol Hill.
Well, if he sticks a knife in the back of this wonderful president we got. Last question. Robert Howard, Admiral, a SEAL's SEAL, a man's man. He looks like a great guy. He's going to be the replacement for Flynn. Is that the idea?
That's the sense at this point. That's right. He is a former U.S. Navy SEAL, worked under, or was in Central Command, U.S. Central Command under General James Mattis at the time. Went to MIT. I mean, he checks all of the boxes. And, you know, one of the interesting parts of his story, if indeed he becomes National Security Advisor, he actually grew up in Iran. He actually went to school. He's American, obviously, but he did go to school, high school in Iran, and he's actually fluent in Persian. So there's your little tip of the day. There's your trivia tip of the day, Pat.
You got it, buddy. Well, you keep it up, David. Appreciate your work. David Brody, our Washington correspondent, who's doing a fabulous job for you and for all of us at CBN. Well, our CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief, Chris Mitchell, is with us now from Jerusalem. And Chris, the thought was that Netanyahu really didn't want to go gung-ho on building all those houses and settlements, and that Trump was doing him a favor against the hardliners. Is there any truth to any of that?
I think there is, Pat. When Trump leaned over to Netanyahu and said, let's go a bit slower in the settlements, that was sort of a political bone for Netanyahu, because he's been getting a lot of pressure from the right, Education Minister Naftali Bennett among them, who want to annex parts of the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, or they want to even expand the whole West Bank. So there was something, it helped him out politically here. And I would say, Pat, I just add the reaction here from Israel, including Naftali Bennett, the Education Minister. He says it's a new era in U.S.-Israel relations. He said that actually the Palestinian flag had been taken down from the White House and the Israeli flag put up. On the left, Israeli politicians are lamenting the fact that the two-state solution is sort of seeing an alternative right now. And I was on the phone earlier today with Michael Oren. He's the Deputy Minister of Public Policy, and he was saying, now he lived through the Obama administration for 4 or 5 years, so he knows how bad it can be, and he said it's a new era as well. And let me just add, Pat, when the Palestinian reaction, Julie Stahl was on the phone earlier today as well with the PLO chief negotiator, Saeb Erekat, and he said, quoting, abandonment of the two-state solution is going to spell disaster on Palestinians and Israelis and on the region in the bigger context. So from the Palestinian point of view, it's probably a sad day for them after yesterday's press conference.
Chris, the President, Trump, was talking about a big deal. And for me, a big deal would be you bring in Jordan, you bring in Saudi Arabia, you bring in Egypt, El-Sisi, and you bring in Israel. And at least for that group, and you suddenly have an area-wide peace agreement. Are they talking something like that, do you think?
I think that's exactly what they're talking about, Pat. You know, for years, the holy grail of the Israeli-Palestinian diplomacy has been the two-state solution, and now that press conference yesterday sort of abandoned that. And so I think they're looking at it in a regional context, a regional diplomacy. And as I was listening to the press conference yesterday, Pat, these are some of the things I heard Trump say. We're going to make a big deal, a bigger and better deal than people in this room even understand. It could take many, many countries, and that refers to Jordan, Saudi Arabia, the Gulf states, and Egypt, would cover a very large territory. He says other players at a very high level, so that would include all of those states as well. And this is Mr. Art of the Deal, sort of changing the parameters of the Middle East peace.
Well, it's long overdue. Well, last question. Israel and the U.S. seem to be on the same page in terms of Iran. What are they looking to do? I mean, we've got that Iranian deal, but Trump is sort of say, well, I want to preserve it. What do you think the Israelis hope to have done?
Well, certainly that was probably one of the main things they talked about in private yesterday. I think, first of all, they're going to put Iran on notice. And I think one example is that the Trump administration has already done that by putting Iran on notice after that ballistic missile test just a few days ago. I think that's one thing they're going to do. Perhaps more sanctions. I think Trump doesn't want to necessarily abrogate the whole Iranian deal, but I think we're going to see increased sanctions. We're going to see increased holding Iran accountable. I talked to one Middle East expert earlier today, and he said, look to Yemen. That could be the next confrontation between the U.S. and Iran. But I think we're going to also see, Pat, maybe covert actions going on. And one other thing I'd like to add, Pat, is, you know, I remember in the Cold War days when I was just a young kid, Radio Free Europe. Yeah. And I would think they're going to be talking directly to the Iranian people. Prime Minister Netanyahu did that just a couple of weeks ago. It was sort of unprecedented. And I think we're going to see trying to talk to the Iranian opposition and also talk to the Iranian people. There are a lot of Iranians inside Iran that really detest the Iranian mullahs and what's going on in Tehran. And I think they're going to try to foment part of that opposition. You remember in 2009 when really, President Obama had his Ronald Reagan moment that he could have spoken to the millions of people that came out in the street, and yet he failed to do that. I think we're going to see Trump and perhaps Netanyahu do the same.
Well, thank you, Chris.